Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to dissect the recurring themes of viral internet horror lore, but we're going to do it by walking you directly into the nightmare yourself. We aren't just looking at dry facts here. We're going to experience the precise structure that makes these terrifying digital stories so incredibly effective. So, consider this your final warning before we step into the dark. Picture this. Have you ever found yourself totally, completely alone at 2 a.m.? Just imagine the intense isolation of the witching hour for a second. It's a time that's frequently tagged in digital lore as the exact moment when the veil between our world and the unknown begins to tear. The streets are empty. The ambient noise of the city is completely dead. It's literally just you, the silence, and that creeping feeling that maybe, just maybe, you aren't actually as alone as you think you are. To really grasp how these viral narratives get under our skin, we're going to trace the chronological progression of a cursed night. Our descent starts right where all good scares do, in a place of safety, and it systematically strips away your comfort, hour by hour, pushing you deeper into the unknown. All right, let's start with Section 1, Whispers Around the Campfire. So it's 10 p.m., you're safe, you're surrounded by friends, sharing stories, seeking a cheap thrill from a very comfortable distance. You know how it is. We willingly engage with scary stories, sitting behind the safety of our screens or a warm fire, thinking we're entirely in control. But as those stories end and you begin your solitary journey home, a digital hashtag like #CreepyEncounters suddenly feels like a very real, looming promise in the darkness. The safety net of the group is completely gone. The stories you literally just consumed are now echoing in your mind, totally priming your brain to see threats in the shadows. This is the exact moment the lore stops being fiction and starts feeling like a premonition. Moving on to Section 2. The Desolate Road, or as it's often called, the Sunsian Sadak. By midnight, you find yourself walking on the Sunsian Sadak. The streetlights are flickering, or maybe they're just entirely absent. Out here, pure isolation is the primary driver of fear. You're no longer safely scrolling through your feed, right? You are physically walking through the exact environment where these terrifying stories actually take place. And look at this number, over 10 million views. That staggering number represents a primal terror that resonates deeply with audiences across the globe. Over 10 million people have fixated on the concept of a single haunted road. Why? Because out here there is literally nowhere to hide and absolutely no one to hear you if you scream. As you walk this road, you start to sense a presence. You hear the crunch of gravel right behind you. There's a sudden freezing drop in temperature. You are stepping directly into a huge reoccurring trope in these narratives, where turning around instantly seals your fate. The horror here relies on agonizing suspense. That entity behind you is always far more terrifying in your imagination, as long as you follow the golden rule and keep your eyes locked dead ahead. But the road just seems to stretch on forever, twisting in ways it absolutely shouldn't. And that's when you realize you might be the victim of a chalava. This is a super common fixture in these stories, specifically designed to completely distort your sense of direction and separate you from safety. It plays on our deep-seated anxiety of losing our way, manipulating your perception until you are utterly and hopelessly lost in the dark. Which brings us to Section 3, the desolate railway station. The illusion lifts just enough for you to stumble into the flickering lights of an abandoned transit hub. This echoes the heavily viewed lore of places like the infamous Begumpur railway station. The fog is rolling over the cracked concrete platform. The ticket booths are boarded up tight. I mean, it's a place built for massive crowds, making its current emptiness feel incredibly unnatural and deeply menacing. As you stand there on the platform, you realize you're in a state of purgatory. You're trapped between destinations. You aren't where you started, and you haven't reached where you're going. You are in a liminal space, an in-between zone where the normal rules of reality just don't apply anymore, making you the absolute perfect target for whatever is lurking in the dark. And then, you see it, just a shadow shifting at the far end of the platform. You remember those tags from the campfire stories? The Pisciccini? And you just pray that your mind is playing tricks on you. In the lore, these entities are drawn to desolate spaces, waiting incredibly patiently for a lost traveler to wander right into their domain. The suspense is unbearable as the figure slowly, deliberately turns in your direction. Let's look at Section 4, Boarding the Haunted Train. Desperation sets in as a rusted train finally, mercifully arrives. The doors slide open with this awful metallic groan. Without even thinking, you step aboard the Bhutia train, the haunted train. You're seeking an escape, but actually you're stepping into a much, much deeper trap. You trade the open vulnerability of the platform for the enclosed, inescapable confines of a moving carriage. And notice this. You don't just stumble into this nightmare. You actively walk step by step into your own doom. The fear doesn't just happen to you. It's a direct consequence of a series of desperate choices. You chose to walk the road. You chose to wait at the station. You chose to board the train. You chose this. At exactly 2 a.m., the lights in the carriage flicker and die. The temperature drops freezing cold again, and you realize you're sharing your carriage with the midnight guest. The Adi Roth Kamehameha. This is a staple figure in these stories who never, ever reveals their true face. They sit perfectly still in the corner of your eye, a silent passenger who boarded when you weren't looking, bringing a heavy, suffocating dread into the entire compartment. As the train rattles violently through the pitch blackness, your limbs suddenly feel incredibly heavy. You literally can't move. You start to wonder if this guest is a jinn, acting as a Swapna-Pishak, trapping you in a waking nightmare. It's essentially sleep paralysis, blended perfectly with the supernatural, a terrifying state where your own biological mind becomes the prison, locking you in place while the darkness closes in around you. The sheer claustrophobia of the train carriage perfectly amplifies the suspense here. You are locked in an enclosed metal tube, hurtling through the darkness with the entity inching closer every single time the lights flicker. There is nowhere to run. The doors are locked tight. You are bound to this terrifying journey until the very end of the line. And finally, Section 5, the cursed final destination. The train screeches to a violent halt, forcing you out for your Akhari Safar, your final journey. You step off onto a platform heavily overgrown with dead vines. Whether it's a Bhutia Gaon, a doomed village, or a Shapit Haveli, a cursed mansion, these destinations are always entirely abandoned. They're stained by an old, unspeakable tragedy, and they always hold a dark, often 30-year-old secret that completely defies all logic. The environment itself is hostile. It holds on to the trauma of the past and is eager to inflict it on absolutely anyone foolish enough to arrive. Look at this stark contrast. The real world offers safety, logic, and the promise of dawn. But step by step, all of those safety nets have been systematically stripped away. The narrative intentionally dismantles your comfort until you are entirely trapped in a space ruled by the paranormal, by total isolation, and by an eternal night. So, as this explainer comes to an end and we step back into the comfort of reality, these viral stories leave us with a really lingering, uncomfortable thought. Sure, we can close our screens, we can turn on the lights, but the psychological architecture of these tales is specifically designed to stick with you. So as you sit there, listening to my voice, feeling completely safe, I want you to ask yourself, in the dark corners of your own room, are you absolutely sure you're alone right now?